Remember those forgotten 10-minute recipes? The ones you could only find in old cookbooks and nowhere else? Back then, these quick dishes meant hot lunches before school, supper in a flash, or a warm plate ready before Dad got home. Why did the easiest meals with the most heart disappear first? Cream cheese and olive sandwiches were the kind of snack that told you a party was about to happen, or that someone had just stopped by with a story to share. These open-faced, tangy little bites lived in the pages of homemaking magazines and recipe booklets from the 1940s through the 1970s. There was something about the combination of smooth cream cheese and the briny bite of green olives that made them feel grown up, even a little fancy. You would spread the cheese thick on soft white bread, then top it with neatly sliced olives. Sometimes the bread was cut into triangles or pinwheels to serve at bridge clubs or church luncheons. Other times, they were just a quiet treat during a mid-afternoon rest. They did not need heat or time, just a butter knife and a steady hand. You could dress them up with parsley, chives, or paprika, but the base never changed. It was creamy, salty, and just odd enough to stand out. Today, we think of tea sandwiches as old-fashioned, maybe even dull. But these little bites packed a punch, and they were easy to love. They were quick, memorable, and just quirky enough to stick in your mind. They deserve a comeback. Mock chicken legs, also known as city chicken, were a clever little trick straight out of the Great Depression playbook. You would skewer cubes of pork or veal, sometimes even ground meat shaped by hand, and bread them just like a fried chicken leg. A quick sear or broil, and suddenly you had something golden and crisp, almost like the real thing. In cookbooks from the 1940s and 1950s, this was a budget recipe made glamorous. It popped up again in wartime pamphlets, where real chicken was rationed but creativity was not. And yes, it cooked fast. 10 minutes on high heat with some careful turning, and you had dinner. These were the kinds of recipes that fooled the eye and filled the belly. Families with little meat could stretch their groceries a bit further, and kids who loved fried chicken never knew the difference. Mock chicken legs made people feel like they had a proper meal, even when things were tight. That feeling that you were not missing out, even if you were scraping by, was everything. Today, city chicken might sound like a novelty, but back then it was comfort, dignity, and a hot meal in just 10 minutes. Peanut butter and bacon toast sounds like something from a dare, but it was a real snack that fed hungry kids, late-night workers, and even soldiers on leave. You would take a piece of white bread, toast it golden, and spread on a thick layer of peanut butter. Then came the crispy bacon, hot from the pan and crackling with grease. The result was salty, sweet, nutty, and rich. It was also fast. Wartime cookbooks from the 1940s featured this combination as a protein-packed pick-me-up. It used what was available and shelf-stable and made it taste like something indulgent. Some variations added banana slices. Others sprinkled a little sugar or cinnamon on top. But even plain, it did the job. You could make a whole tray of these in minutes. It was warm, sticky, and satisfying in a way that only old-school snacks can be. The idea may sound odd today, but if you ever try one, you will understand why this was a go-to treat in homes across the country. This was not just a recipe. It was a survival trick with a sweet aftertaste, and for some, it was the only thing keeping spirits high after a long shift or a cold walk home. Jellied tomato juice cocktail was the kind of dish that told guests this was a proper gathering. You would pour tomato juice into a bowl, mix in plain gelatin, add a dash of lemon, Worcestershire sauce, and celery salt, and then let it set in the fridge. It congealed into a cool, savory jelly, bright red and wobbly. Served in cocktail glasses or tiny molds, it was garnished with a celery stick or lemon peel. Mid-century homemakers believed it looked refined and appetizing. Guests thought it was fancy, and best of all, it took 10 minutes or less to mix up before chilling. This was not an everyday dish. It was made to impress, quickly and cheaply. You would see it in women's magazines from the 1950s and 1960s, usually placed beside deviled eggs or tiny pickles. It was part of the show, the edible centerpiece. Some found the texture strange, but it was refreshing and surprisingly flavorful. It was clean, cold, and made you feel like you were part of something stylish. These days we scoff at molded salads, but back then jellied tomato cocktails were a status symbol in 10 minutes flat, a forgotten gem from the golden age of home entertaining. Cottage cheese with pineapple rings was a fixture of every mid-century diet menu and every tray at a women's club lunch. Sweet and salty, creamy and sharp. All you needed was a scoop of cottage cheese and a canned pineapple ring arranged on lettuce or a plate. Sometimes it came with a cherry on top or a dash of paprika. It looked like a slice of sunshine, and it was fast. No cooking, no prep, no fuss. Just open, spoon, and stack. This dish lived in every 1960s and 1970s cookbook promising light fare or low-calorie lunches. But it was not just for dieters. Busy parents, students, and office workers made it because it was easy, filling, and mess-free. Just enough protein to hold you over, and sweetness to feel like a treat. It's vanished from our plates, but not from the memories of anyone who grew up scraping the last bite from a melamine bowl. A salad, a snack, and nostalgia in under 10 minutes. Hot dog roll-ups with cheese were not just for kids. They were for moments when money was tight, time short, and hunger loud. Take a slice of bread, roll it flat, place a hot dog inside, sprinkle cheese, and roll it like a cigar. Bake or broil until the cheese bubbled and bread crisped. 10 minutes, tops. These appeared in post-war cookbooks and budget flyers. Cheap, cheerful, and adaptable. Use mustard, relish, or swap in whatever cheese you had. Some moms brushed the outside with butter. It was lunch or dinner when the fridge was nearly bare, often served with tomato soup or carrot sticks, simple sides for simple food. But do not be fooled. These roll-ups were crunchy, melty, and satisfying. Fast food at home before fast food chains ruled the street. Egg curry and cream sauce was a 10-minute dinner that tasted like it took hours. Start with hard-boiled eggs, already cooked, already peeled, and make a quick sauce from cream, butter, curry powder, and maybe broth. Heat it all, pour it over the eggs, and you're done. Rich, warming, full of flavor. Mid-century American cookbooks borrowed this from Anglo-Indian dishes, adjusted for pantry staples. No exotic spices needed, just curry powder and a saucepan. It showed up during Lent or when meat was off the table. It made you feel like you were eating something elegant. Worked great over toast or rice. Best of all, it used up eggs about to expire. A homemaker's solution, a hungry person's delight. Fast food used to mean creamy, seasoned, and homemade. This was one of those meals, simple, cozy, and now completely overlooked. Celery logs with cheese whiz and paprika might sound like a joke today, but they were once a lifesaver at last-minute parties and school lunches. A stalk of celery was cleaned and filled with bright orange processed cheese spread. Sometimes it was cheese whiz. Other times, pimento cheese, peanut butter, or anything that held shape. Then came the paprika, sprinkled on like fairy dust. The whole thing took maybe a minute per stalk. You could make 10 in under 10 minutes and have an appetizer tray ready. They added crunch, color, and creaminess to any gathering. Kids loved them. Adults pretended they were just for kids, and hosts relied on them when the guests were already at the door. These snacks showed up in homemaker magazines, recipe swaps, and even 1960s commercials. Healthy enough if you ignored the cheese, and they had enough bite to hold attention. They may not look like much now, but they were fast, fun, and frugal. Everything a party plate needed. Tomato soup with crushed saltines and a butter swirl sounds simple because it is. And that was the point. You heated canned tomato soup, crumbled in saltines, and dropped in a pat of butter before serving. The butter melted into the red surface, swirling like cream in coffee. It added richness and made it feel homemade. This was the working person's soup, done in 10 minutes. It appeared in every cookbook on quick meals and soup suppers. It fed kids on snow days and college students in basement apartments. The crackers added crunch, then softened just enough to thicken the soup. Eat it with grilled cheese or just a spoon in a blanket. It was cheap, reliable, and tasted like care, even from a can. Today we chase freshness like it's a trophy. But once, this soup was everything: comfort, speed, and a full stomach. Bologna cups with peas and cheese were what happened when creativity met desperation, in a good way. A slice of bologna was cut around the edges and dropped into a muffin tin. Baked or pan-fried, the edges curled into little cups. Inside went canned peas and shredded cheese. 10 minutes later, dinner was served. This lived in 1970s cookbooks and homemaker magazines, colorful, quick, and surprisingly filling. Kids found it funny. Parents found it easy. No thawing, chopping, or even much stirring. Pantry to table in record time. The result? A salty, creamy, savory little bundle. You could eat it with a fork or your hands. Not a 5-star entree, but back then it was smart. It used what you had and made it look new. When time was tight and money tighter, that meant everything. Clever. Fun.fast. Salmon patties with cornmeal crust were the queens of the 10-minute dinner rotation. Just open a can of salmon, drain it, mash it up with egg, onion, and whatever seasoning was nearby. Then came the cornmeal, a generous dusting that gave these patties a crunchy edge when they hit the skillet. You could mix and fry a whole batch in under 10 minutes. Every church cookbook from the 1960s to the 1980s had its own version, passed between neighbors and handwritten on index cards stained with oil. These were made for Fridays during Lent, for evenings when groceries were low, and for times when protein had to come from a can instead of a butcher's case. People might turn up their noses now, but salmon patties had dignity. They sizzled, they smelled wonderful, and they held together with nothing but a little hope and a hot pan. Sometimes a dollop of ketchup or tartar sauce went on top. Sometimes it was just a squeeze of lemon. But they always worked. They were dinner, lunch, or even a sandwich the next day. And back then, that was more than enough. These patties were quick, clever, and as close to gourmet as a pantry could get. Spaghetti spoon pie was one of those brilliant ideas that sounded strange until you tried it. Take last night's leftover spaghetti, mix it with a beaten egg and a bit of shredded cheese, and press it into a pie pan. Pop it in the oven for 10 minutes, and suddenly, spaghetti was no longer just spaghetti. It was a crispy-bottomed pie you could cut into wedges. This dish was born from thrift, but became a staple of fast dinners for busy households. You did not need anything fancy, just a bit of pasta, something to bind it, and heat. It was a great way to repurpose a few cups of noodles that would not stretch to feed the whole family on their own. Spoon pie made them stretch. The egg firmed up during baking, and the cheese melted through it all, turning yesterday's dinner into something that tasted brand new. Add herbs if you had them, or a spoonful of tomato sauce for flair. It was never glamorous, but it was always satisfying. It proved that with a little creativity and a hot oven, you could make a second act out of anything. Today, we throw away leftovers. Back then, they became pies. Canned spinach with vinegar and sugar was not glamorous, but it was fast, and more importantly, it worked. During World War II, when rations were tight and canned vegetables were one of the few things you could count on, people had to find ways to make them edible. Spinach, with its metallic tang and mushy texture, needed help. Enter vinegar for sharpness, sugar for balance. Together, they gave that flat green mass a bit of a kick. You would open the can, heat the spinach on the stove, stir in a spoonful of white vinegar and just enough sugar to make it sing. It was served as a side dish in thousands of homes across America, especially when fresh produce was out of reach. You could make it in 10 minutes, even 5 if you worked quickly. Sometimes a bit of chopped onion went in, sometimes not. It depended on what was in the pantry and how many mouths were waiting at the table. The result was sweet, sour, and soft. An acquired taste, maybe, but one people came to rely on. It was not meant to impress. It was meant to fill the plate and offer a little brightness to an otherwise dull meal. Quick corn fritters with syrup drizzle were a roadside dream and a pantry staple. You would mix a can of corn with flour, a single egg, some baking powder, and just enough milk to hold it all together. Then you would drop spoonfuls into a hot skillet, letting them puff and brown until the edges crisped up golden. They could be savory, with salt and pepper, or sweet, topped with syrup or honey. Either way, they took 10 minutes and made bellies happy. Diners all over America served them as sides, especially in the South and Midwest. And at home, they were the definition of flexible. No cornmeal? Use flour. No syrup? Try jam. The batter was forgiving, the method quick, and the taste always comforting. You could make them for breakfast with coffee or for dinner with beans. Some families added shredded cheese. Others folded in scallions or chopped peppers. But the bones of the recipe stayed the same. Canned corn, hot oil, and a little hope. It is easy to forget how something so fast could be so filling. But in kitchens with cold floors and old pans, these fritters were a promise that something good could still come together fast. Pimento cheese on toast points was the ultimate Southern shortcut. You started with a bowl of shredded cheddar, stirred in mayonnaise, chopped pimentos, and maybe a splash of vinegar or Worcestershire sauce. Then you spread it on triangle-cut toast, white bread, lightly buttered, broiled just enough to crisp. You could serve them cold or pop them in the oven for a few minutes until bubbly and golden. Either way, they only took 10 minutes. Every Southern cookbook worth its salt had a version, often passed down by women who knew how to host a party on a dime. This spread was cheese with personality, sharp, tangy, creamy, and just spicy enough. It could sit on a cracker or a celery stick, but toast points were the real deal. They gave it structure, crunch, and just enough heft to make it a meal. Pimento cheese was quick, clever, and made from things already in the fridge. It was served at weddings, funerals, and baby showers. It showed up at church suppers and back porches. It was fast food in the best sense. Homemade, heartfelt, and ready in minutes. Today, it is gourmet. Back then, it was Tuesday. One-egg pancakes with raisins were Depression-era brilliance disguised as breakfast. You needed one egg, a bit of flour, water or milk, and a pinch of salt. Raisins gave sweetness and texture. No syrup needed if money was tight. You mixed it all in a bowl, dropped it onto a hot griddle, and in minutes you had hot cakes ready to flip. These pancakes were thin, more like crepes than modern stacks, but they were warm, comforting, and filling. You could make 6 or 8 with just a little batter, stretching one egg across an entire meal. For families living on pennies a day, that meant everything. The raisins, often soaked in water or leftover tea to plump them up, added chew and sweetness. They were the treat inside the practical. You could serve them with powdered sugar if you had it, or just butter. Sometimes not even that. But the smell of them cooking in a cold kitchen, that was worth more than money. These pancakes were a morning hug in lean times. We talk about minimalism today like it is trendy. Back then, it was survival, and these pancakes made it taste just a little better. Baked apples with brown sugar and margarine were one of the quickest desserts a family could make, but they tasted like they had been in the oven for an hour. You would core an apple, stuff the center with brown sugar and a pat of margarine, and microwave it until soft and bubbling. That was it. Less than 10 minutes from counter to table. This dessert was a staple in mid-century diet cookbooks and homemaker magazines. It was sweet, warm, and felt indulgent without needing flour, eggs, or oil. Apples were cheap. Margarine was always on hand. Brown sugar stretched far. Sometimes people added raisins, cinnamon, or even a dash of nutmeg. But even plain, it worked. You would serve it with a spoon and a drizzle of the melted sugar butter mix from the bottom of the dish. And maybe, just maybe, a little cream if it was a special night. These baked apples were loved by kids and grown-ups alike. They made a humble fruit into something soft and fragrant, like the smell of autumn in a warm kitchen. This was comfort food for when you were watching your pennies, but still wanted something sweet before the lights went out. Creamed corn and egg drop skillet was one of those recipes that never looked fancy, but always left you full. You would heat a can of creamed corn in a skillet, crack in a couple of eggs, and gently stir while they cooked through. That was it. No chopping, no measuring, no baking. Just a few minutes on the stove and dinner was ready. This dish came from 1950s family meal plans, often listed under economy suppers or quick warm bowls. It was simple, soft, and surprisingly rich. The eggs added protein. The corn added sweetness. And if you had pepper or parsley, you would toss that in too. Some recipes added a splash of milk to stretch it. Others used cheese or crumbled crackers on top. But even at its most basic, it worked. This was not a showpiece. It was a solution. A way to feed 4 people with 1 can and 2 eggs. It was hot, fast, and filled the house with a smell that said, "Something is cooking." You may not find it in restaurants. But in tired kitchens with chipped pans, this was real food, and it was ready in 10 minutes flat. Shredded lettuce with mayonnaise and paprika was not just a salad. It was a way to make the simplest plate look complete. You would take iceberg lettuce, shred it finely, sometimes by hand, sometimes with a dull knife, and drop it onto a dish in a small mound. Then came the mayonnaise, a generous spoonful right on top, and then the paprika, a dusting of orange that turned this into something that looked intentional. This was served on luncheon trays next to deviled eggs or tomato slices in women's clubs and school cafeterias across the 1950s and 1960s. It was fast, easy, and had just enough flavor to count as a side. No chopping of vegetables, no dressing to mix, just cold crunch, creamy topping, and a little spice. People loved it for its texture and for how well it played with meatloaf, sandwiches, or tuna salad. It was diet food and filler food all in one, and if you wanted to fancy it up, a sprig of parsley or a canned olive went right on top. Today it seems too plain to notice, but this was the 10-minute salad of the past. Humble, practical, and oddly satisfying. Canned asparagus with cheese sauce was the shortcut version of a dish that once lived in fancy hotel brunches. It made its way into Sunday suppers and quick weeknight meals when families wanted something that felt elegant without costing time or money. You would drain a can of asparagus spears, warm them in a pan, and pour over a quick cheese sauce made from evaporated milk, margarine, and cheddar. Sometimes the cheese came from a jar, sometimes from slices. But no matter how you made it, the whole thing was ready in under 10 minutes. The asparagus stayed soft, but the richness of the cheese made it feel special. This was a vegetable side that held its own next to baked ham or meatloaf. It was served at holiday dinners and Tuesday lunches alike. Housewives praised it for being company-worthy. Kids remembered it for being the only way they liked asparagus. It was easy, warm, and creamy, everything mid-century comfort food promised to be. Today, we chase fresh greens and roasted stalks. But back then, the canned version with a bubbling cheese blanket was more than enough. It was fast, familiar, and just a little bit fancy. Graham cracker pudding cups were the gold standard of no-bake desserts in mid-century America. All you needed was a box of instant pudding, a pack of graham crackers, and a few clean teacups or jelly jars. You made the pudding, chocolate, vanilla, or butterscotch, then layered it with crackers like it was cake. That was it. No oven, no stovetop. Just a spoon, a bowl, and 10 quiet minutes. These cups showed up in after-school kitchens, church socials, and sleepovers where fancy dessert was never on the menu. As the graham crackers sat, they softened into cake-like layers, soaking in the pudding and making every bite better than the last. Sometimes kids added whipped topping, sometimes a few sprinkles or banana slices. But even plain, these were perfect. The first spoonful felt like a reward. The second felt like a secret. Today, we might reach for store-bought snacks. But these pudding cups were homemade simplicity, fast, clever, and endlessly satisfying. They tasted like childhood, like weeknight treats and school report rewards. And for a generation that knew how to stretch ingredients and time, they were a sweet little miracle. Minute steak with mustard butter glaze was what you made when guests were coming and the meat was thin. These paper-thin beef slices were cut to cook fast, really fast. You dropped them into a hot skillet, watched them sizzle and curl, and flipped them quick before they toughened up. While they cooked, you mixed soft butter with mustard. Maybe spicy brown, maybe yellow, maybe whatever was on hand. Once the steaks were off the heat, you spooned that buttery glaze right on top. It melted across the surface like a sauce from a much fancier kitchen. These were called minute steaks, because they really were that fast. 10 minutes from fridge to table. They were served with mashed potatoes, white rice, or just slices of toasted bread to mop up the sauce. It was a simple meal that tasted dressed up. Post-war cookbooks framed it as efficient elegance, a way to feel proud of a meal even when the meat was thin and time was shorter. And it worked. That tangy butter turned plain steak into something memorable. It was the kind of shortcut that did not feel like cutting corners. It felt smart. It felt like dinner done right. Cottage fried apples in butter and sugar were the unofficial scent of fall kitchens and chilly mornings. You took a few firm apples, sliced them thin, and dropped them into a hot pan with margarine or butter. Then came the brown sugar. It melted into the fruit and coated the slices until they softened and shimmered, just this side of caramel. The whole thing took maybe 10 minutes, less if you were not fussy. These apples were spooned onto toast, waffles, or oatmeal. They showed up next to pork chops or even inside grilled cheese sandwiches, depending on the family. During apple season, they were a way to use the less perfect fruit. Bruised, small, too tart. None of that mattered once the sugar hit the pan. Cottage fried apples came from country cookbooks and back-of-the-envelope notes written by hand. They were cozy, fast, and inexpensive. And they made breakfast or dinner taste like something far more thoughtful. No cinnamon was needed, though it never hurt. This was food that warmed your hands while it cooked and your belly once it landed. It was simple, it was sweet, and it was proof that old recipes did not need dressing up to feel just right. Cracker omelets were the kind of meal that only made sense once you were hungry enough to try it. You would beat a couple of eggs, crush in saltine crackers, sometimes dry, sometimes soaked, and pour it into a hot skillet. The crackers softened, but kept texture. It puffed up slightly. You flipped it if you could, or just folded it and hoped for the best. Depression-era cookbooks listed it as a way to stretch eggs and add bulk. It tasted somewhere between a frittata and a savory pancake. People added onion, cheese, or vegetables if they had any, but even plain, it filled the belly. It was cheap, hot, and fast. This was not restaurant food. It was survival food with a creative twist. And while it might sound odd now, it was once a trusted go-to when groceries were scarce. Sometimes all a meal needed was one egg, a few crumbs, and a little grit. And when money was tight, cracker omelets delivered. Cheese dreams were the lunchroom royalty of open-faced sandwiches. White bread, a slab of cheddar or American cheese, and one tomato slice in the center. That was it. You broiled it until the cheese bubbled and the bread crisped. It looked simple, and it was. But for kids or tired parents, it felt like comfort. The tomato gave acidity. The cheese oozed at the edges, and that soft bread turned crisp and chewy. These showed up in cookbooks from the 1940s through the 1970s. Some sprinkled oregano, others swapped in pimento cheese, but the idea stayed. Fast, hot, satisfying. You made these when the fridge was nearly empty. They were cheap, cheerful, and best eaten straight from the pan. No fuss. Just enough flavor to forget you were scraping by. Instant coffee ice cream cups were dessert with no oven, no eggs, and no stress. Just whipped topping, a spoonful of instant coffee, and some sugar or sweetened milk. Mix until light and smooth, spoon into cups, and freeze for an hour. That was it. No churning, no gadgets. These were pulled from the freezer after dinner or served at card games. They were fast, frosty, and surprisingly refined. The coffee gave depth. The cream made it soft. You could top them with chocolate shavings or a cherry. But even plain, they felt like a treat. These desserts came from 1960s cookbooks that loved shortcuts. They looked classy, but were easy at heart. Today we buy gourmet ice cream. But back then, these little freezer cups felt like magic. Potato chip and egg scramble was exactly what it sounds like, and somehow even better than you think. You crushed up a handful of chips, stirred them into beaten eggs, and scrambled it all in a buttered pan. The chips softened but still kept some crunch. It tasted like breakfast met junk food and made something worth remembering. This recipe showed up in 1960s cookbooks as a novelty dish. and stayed in the minds of anyone who grew up eating it. It was salty, crispy, creamy, and fast. You could make it in under 10 minutes with just a pan and 2 ingredients. Some added hot sauce or cheese, others kept it plain. Either way, it was a late-night fix or a quick lunch when nothing else sounded good. It was made for teenage hunger, hangovers, or unexpected guests. It also used up broken chips at the bottom of the bag. This was not refined cooking. It was resourceful and deeply comforting. Today, we might call it fusion. Back then, it was just breakfast with a little extra joy. Applesauce with red hots melted in turned a school lunch side into a carnival treat. You opened a jar of applesauce, heated it on the stove, and stirred in red-hot cinnamon candies. In minutes, they melted into swirls of crimson, giving the sauce a spicy sweetness and bright pink color. This trick was loved by kids, praised by mothers, and noted in the 1950s and 1960s cookbooks. It turned plain into playful. The cinnamon heat was mild but exciting. The color made it feel festive. The speed, unbeatable. You could serve it warm or cold in bowls or over pork chops. Some even poured it into molds. It looked like effort, but was really a shortcut. And it tasted like childhood. Sugary, simple, and fun in the best way. Today we use balsamic glaze or fancy herbs. Back then, red hots did the trick. Peanut butter and honey sandwiches on raisin bread were the kind of lunch that stuck in your memory and your teeth. The peanut butter was thick, the honey was sticky and golden, and the raisin bread, with its bursts of sweetness, made it feel special. You did not need jelly, you did not need butter. Just 3 ingredients and 2 slices. It took 5 minutes to make, which meant 10 sandwiches were packed before the bus came. This showed up in lunchboxes across the 1960s and 1970s, often wrapped in wax paper and slightly squished. But it still hit the spot. It was chewy, sweet, and filling. Parents made it because it was fast. Kids loved it because it was tasty. And everyone remembered it because it was different. The raisins gave it that little twist, like dessert and lunch had merged. Today, we chase gourmet spreads. But this sandwich proved that old tricks, done simply, still satisfy. Cold baked beans on saltines might sound like something invented in desperation. And that is because it was. You would open a can of baked beans, spoon them onto saltine crackers, and eat them just like that. No heating, no mixing, no dressing up. This recipe appeared in 1970s snack cookbooks and low-budget meal guides, mostly in the quick fix or no-cook sections. And while it might not look like much, it did the job. The salt from the crackers balanced the sweet, tangy beans. The texture was crunchy, then soft. It was a weirdly satisfying contrast. Some people added cheese, others used ketchup or mustard. But the core idea stayed the same. Fast food made from shelf staples, ready in minutes, and surprisingly comforting. Kids loved the simplicity. Adults appreciated the thrift. And everyone understood that sometimes a can and a sleeve of crackers could get you through the evening. Microwave cinnamon toast with powdered sugar and margarine was the shortcut to comfort. You took a slice of soft white bread, smeared it with margarine straight from the tub, sprinkled on cinnamon, and shook a snowfall of powdered sugar across the top. Into the microwave it went for 20 to 30 seconds, just enough to melt everything into a gooey layer of sweet spice. No toaster, no oven, no adult supervision. This was the breakfast of kids who made their own morning routine. The sugar would pool in the corners. The margarine would soak through the bread. You would eat it hot, floppy, and way too sweet, and it was perfect. It smelled like warmth. It tasted like holidays. And even though the crust might go rubbery, nobody cared. This toast was about speed, sweetness, and the pride of making something all by yourself. You could add raisins if you were brave, but most just kept it simple. Cinnamon toast like this was a rite of passage. 5 minutes, 1 microwave, and a craving. That was all it took. A recipe that is largely forgotten right now but still made some noise back when it was really popular in the 20th century is shrimp and grits. The secret to an incredible plate of these was all in the milk, butter, and cheddar cheese. Depending on the quality and how you handled it, you would ever have shrimp that had not really absorbed the flavor or the best seafood experience you could hope to have at home. Luckily, over many long years, the home cooks of our nation perfected the recipe and kept passing it down, one generation to the next. Some chopped bacon for a smoky flavor, or sausage drippings were also really popular picks for older chefs to run with. Grits would be made with dent corn and often boiled, then mixed with the butter and milk. How did your family make these, if they ever did? Oatmeal went out the window and cornmeal came in, especially as the base of dishes like Johnny cakes, which were the cravings of everyone. They were made from fried cornmeal gruel, hot water, salt, or sweetened milk if it was available. People used a specific kind of pan to make these too, and it was known as a spider pan. Essential to the Johnny cake experience was keeping a very watchful eye on them to ensure the crisp did not burn, as well keeping a constant supply of bacon fat. That was another thing that got popular as people would store the fat from strips of bacon up and use it in dishes like this. In half an hour, you had a pretty decent lunch made with some pretty bare-bones ingredients. One of Grandma's best-kept secrets for luscious, shiny hair was her coconut oil hair mask. This tropical treat, rich in fatty acids, is a natural powerhouse for maintaining strong, vibrant locks. Making the mask is easy. Simply melt a couple of tablespoons of coconut oil in your hands and massage it directly into your scalp and hair. For a deeper treatment, wrap your hair in a warm towel and leave it for at least 30 minutes before washing it out. You can even leave it overnight for an extra boost of hydration. Coconut oil's benefits for hair are well known. The lauric acid in coconut oil helps it penetrate the hair shaft, nourishing from the inside out. It acts as a natural conditioner, preventing protein loss, which results in shinier, stronger hair. It also moisturizes the scalp, helping to prevent dryness and dandruff. Grandma swore by it, claiming it gave her hair the kind of shine that would make a shampoo commercial jealous. Used for centuries in tropical regions, coconut oil was an essential part of beauty routines in India, the Philippines, and the Caribbean. In fact, it's said that ancient Indian women used coconut oil long before it became popular in the Western world. Frozen peas and Miracle Whip salad was the queen of cold side dishes. You knew it had arrived at the potluck when you saw a glass mixing bowl filled with bright green peas, foggy with chill, and topped with what looked like whipped snow. It was not fancy, but it was proud. And it had followers. You poured in the peas, added a spoonful of Miracle Whip, maybe tossed in shredded cheese or a few bacon bits, and gave it a stir. Done. That was your salad. No greens, no lettuce, no croutons. Just sweet peas and creamy dressing, and somehow it worked. You would eat it cold, right out of the fridge, standing barefoot on the kitchen linoleum. It felt like something your grandmother would hand you on a hot day and say, "It will cool you off and fill you up." And she was right. This was not about crunch or texture. This was about simplicity, memory, and the weird magic that happens when you put two things together that should not belong. If you never tried it, you missed out. And if you did, well, you remember. Speaking of cheddar cheese and nostalgic family meals, we cannot go without mentioning the ever-timeless King Ranch chicken casserole. This is definitely a dish for those people who feel like casseroles without meat or protein of any kind are missing something and do not feel as fulfilling. It would take about an hour to cook, but this did massive numbers in every neighborhood from Detroit to Texas. Especially more so in the South, it was a common practice for families to preserve their King Ranch chicken casserole recipes. The real strength of the dish was that you could use as much of the ingredients as you wanted, letting you double or even triple the dish, an advantage that Southern grandmas would very often use when they were in the mood to dote on their grandkids. In Texas, as well as New York, rice with raisins started becoming a really popular dish among the middle class and a breakfast that many children grew up on. Especially in Indian American communities, which were sparse at the time, but they were still there every other block or two. It was already customary to eat rice with milk and raisins there, so they brought it to America, and others took note. They were not the only ones to introduce it, though. since Chinese Americans also had their own take on the recipe that led to a more custard-like variant. When people could not afford to even eat rice pudding, they would make their rice and eat it with different kinds of nuts and raisins. The idea spread like wildfire in states like Alabama and Arkansas and the Midwest overall. In Michigan, it was a pretty common choice to use brown sugar and cinnamon whenever available. Grandma's whole grain. Porridge was a powerhouse of nutrients to fuel the day ahead. She would often make it with millet, quinoa, or oats, all of which are packed with fiber, vitamins, and minerals. These grains were the perfect way to start the day, providing lasting energy without the crash that comes from sugary cereals. To make her porridge, Grandma would simmer her choice of grains in water or milk until they softened into a creamy, hearty consistency. She'd top it off with honey, cinnamon, or fresh fruit for extra flavor and antioxidants. The beauty of this breakfast was its simplicity and nutritional value. Each grain brought its own benefits to the table. Oats, millet, and quinoa are rich in fiber, which helps support digestion and maintain a healthy weight. They're also full of essential vitamins, like B vitamins, which help promote healthy skin. A fiber-rich diet helps maintain healthy blood sugar levels, and the nutrients in whole grains can keep your skin looking radiant by supporting healthy circulation. Whole grains have been around for centuries, dating back to ancient civilizations like the Egyptians and the Greeks, who recognized the health benefits of these humble grains. Marshmallow fluff and peanut butter apple nachos were a sugar-loaded masterpiece that no school lunch monitor approved. You sliced up apples into thin wedges, laid them out on a plate, and drizzled spoonfuls of peanut butter and fluff across the top like you were decorating a birthday cake. Sometimes you added chocolate chips or crushed pretzels. But even plain, this thing was electric. It was part snack, part dessert, and part chaotic art project. Kids loved it because it felt like something you were not supposed to eat. Parents loved it because it got fruit into their children's bodies without an argument. Fluff was the star, though. Sticky, stretchy, and sweet enough to make your teeth ache, it turned boring apples into something close to candy. These nachos were never in any cookbook. They spread through word of mouth, birthday parties, and after-school sleepovers. You made it with whatever was left in the cupboard. And somehow, it always tasted better than anything you could buy. In 5 minutes, you could go from hungry and bored to sticky and satisfied. So most oatmeal meatloaf recipes use the oats as a side piece to, like, 2 pounds of lean ground beef, but that was obviously not what people were working with back then. Instead, the loaf was made entirely of layers of oatmeal, with sausages and bacon stuffed into it to give that meaty profile. Some dried onions and garlic meant that there was good enough reason to get the fine plates out, and there was always enough to go around too. Plus, grandmas really ran with the recipe right after the Depression ended and things started going back to normal. They would add things like tomato sauces and never spare the eggs or the flour. Probably why kids would love it so much since they went all out with it. But after going through a patch where this was a luxury, you cannot blame them for wanting to go the extra mile either. Now, mashed potatoes and gravy need no introduction or explanation. Everyone and their mother's mother has had it. But did you know how good they were at making it? Receiving this dish from the chefs of generations ago was an entirely different experience in comfort. We do not know what spices they would mix, as each area had its own variations, with some even using mushrooms. Most popular was coriander, thyme, black pepper, and some oregano. The gravy would even put KFC to shame, if we are being completely honest. You just did not feel like eating from the outside when you had such fine dining available at home, and it was the perfect thing to get you back up only our feet from an exhausting day. Grandma's spinach and walnut salad was her secret weapon for staying strong and vibrant. This simple yet nutrient-packed salad featured fresh spinach, crunchy walnuts, and sometimes a drizzle of olive oil or balsamic vinegar for extra flavor. Spinach, a rich source of iron, helped keep her energy levels up, while walnuts provided a hefty dose of omega-3 fatty acids that supported her heart and brain health. This salad worked wonders for the skin, too. Spinach is loaded with antioxidants, including vitamin C, which helps protect skin from damage and encourages collagen production, keeping her skin smooth and youthful. Walnuts, with their omega-3s, help reduce inflammation and keep skin hydrated, contributing to a natural glow. Grandma would often prepare this salad for lunch or as a light dinner, using whatever fresh ingredients were in season. She believed in eating whole, nutritious foods to nourish the body from the inside out, and this salad was a key part of that philosophy. So next time you're looking for a quick, nutrient-packed meal, remember Grandma's spinach and walnut salad. It's a boost of antioxidants, healthy fats, and skin-loving nutrients all in one. Comfort food in the 1940s could not be discussed without somebody bringing up American slumgullion. This was really hot in the Midwest and the South, mostly by its other name of goulash. The dish has been in recipes and cookbooks since at least 1913, and it would include ground beef simmered in a tomato sauce. It was a dish for nights that you really wanted to make matter, and it was also a great way to keep the nutrition and protein intake up. Think of it as like a kind of casserole, and if you have heard of it before, you should know the 1930s versions were a bit different. These ones involved no pasta or macaroni or cheese. Those would become staples of the dish much later on, and we have grandparents to thank for that too. If you were going on over to your grandparents for a casual Christmas or Thanksgiving visit, you may have been surprised to find that the dinner table was anything but casual, with delicacies like squash casserole. Creamy, crunchy, and filled with cheddar cheese and crackers, it is an all-time favorite that has been a staple of holidays and birthdays in many households. It was more popular to correctly reflect past tense in the 20th century, which explains why you would usually only find your grandparents making it, and back then, it would be very common to have this at potlucks. Some households still have it at theirs, but the trend has taken a bit of nosedive with the cracker and cheese combo taking a bit of a backseat. That only goes for if you are ordering a squash casserole from a restaurant though, because from the hands of any American granny, it was a dish impossible to resist. Jell-O and cottage cheese cups were the mid-century dream of nutrition. Part salad, part dessert, and entirely confusing. You took a packet of Jell-O powder, mixed it up as usual, and folded in a few spoonfuls of cottage cheese once it began to set. Maybe you added pineapple chunks, maybe canned mandarins, maybe shredded carrots if you grew up in a house that liked to test your limits. These cups sat in the fridge for an hour, but took less than 5 minutes to make. They were pastel, jiggly, and hard to explain. But every Tupperware party, every potluck, and every retro hospital tray had one. People swore they were good for you. High protein, low cost, no waste. And honestly, they were not half bad. Sweet, creamy, cold. They hit a strange middle ground between treat and obligation. Grandmothers made them by the dozen. Moms packed them in lunchboxes. And now you would be lucky to find one outside a vintage cookbook. But try it again, and you will remember exactly why every refrigerator once had a shelf reserved just for these wobbly little surprises. Cornmeal mush is usually made with water or milk and is a type of pudding or porridge depending on the needs of the meal. This became incredibly widespread in the southeastern and eastern bits of America, and it makes sense given how much wartime rations were consumed there. When the government would hand those out, they would often make a point to lower sugar usage and use molasses to conserve other ingredients, so people would pair cornmeal mush along with them. Mush is a more accurate term since it does kind of land somewhere in the middle ground between a pudding and a porridge. It has the consistency of the latter, but it gels and sets like the former, which gives it a slightly airy texture too. Did you know it would not be cooked in milk though? That was set after the mush was prepared to cool it down. Grandma was a firm believer in the magic of castor oil, and not just for dry skin. She always kept a little bottle handy for one of her best-kept beauty secrets, promoting the growth of lush, thick eyelashes and brows. Applied nightly, castor oil helped give her lashes that extra boost naturally. Castor oil is derived from the seeds of the castor bean plant. It's rich in ricinoleic acid, a fatty acid that penetrates the skin and helps stimulate circulation to hair follicles, promoting healthy hair growth. Grandma would carefully apply a small amount of castor oil to her lashes and brows using a clean spoolie or cotton swab before bed. Over time, she noticed fuller, stronger lashes that were the envy of everyone. Used for centuries, castor oil has roots in ancient Egyptian beauty routines. Cleopatra herself was said to have used it to maintain her famously dramatic eyes. Grandma used to say, "If it worked for Cleopatra, it can work for you." Not only does castor oil promote hair growth, but it also helps to nourish and hydrate the skin around the eyes, reducing the appearance of fine lines. So, you get both thicker lashes and healthier skin, all in one little bottle. Instant ramen egg drop. Scramble was the fastest way to trick yourself into thinking you had cooked something real. No broth, no seasoning packet, just a crumpled brick of instant noodles, dry fried in a hot pan and cracked over with an egg or two. You scrambled it fast, breaking the noodles with your spatula as the egg stuck to the ridges and crevices. Maybe a little soy sauce, maybe some pepper, maybe nothing at all. The whole thing took 5 minutes. It smelled like dorm rooms, pay-per-view nights, and rainy afternoons when the power had just come back on. You felt like a chef, even if the results looked like something out of a junk drawer. It was salty, chewy, eggy, and just greasy enough to make you feel like you got away with something. Nobody wrote this one down. It just happened. A dish passed by instinct, not tradition. And for what it lacked in looks, it made up for in comfort. So most oatmeal meatloaf recipes use the oats as a side piece to, like, 2 pounds of lean ground beef, but that was obviously not what people were working with back then. Instead, the loaf was made entirely of layers of oatmeal, with sausages and bacon stuffed into it to give that meaty profile. Some dried onions and garlic meant that there was good enough reason to get the fine plates out, and there was always enough to go around too. Plus, grandmas really ran with the recipe right after the Depression ended and things started going back to normal. They would add things like tomato sauces and never spare the eggs or the flour. Probably why kids would love it so much since they went all out with it. But after going through a patch where this was a luxury, you cannot blame them for wanting to go the extra mile either. One of Grandma's favorite beauty treatments was rosehip oil. This natural oil, extracted from the seeds of wild rose bushes, became her go-to remedy for glowing, youthful skin. Its secret lies in its high content of vitamin C and essential fatty acids, which work together to combat signs of aging and rejuvenate the skin. To make rosehip oil, the seeds of the rosehips are harvested and cold-pressed to extract the precious oil. The process preserves all the beneficial nutrients, resulting in a potent elixir that's ideal for restoring and hydrating the skin. The benefits of rosehip oil are well documented. It's a powerful anti-aging tool, thanks to its ability to stimulate collagen production. Collagen helps maintain skin's elasticity, reducing fine lines and wrinkles. The essential fatty acids, including omega-3 and omega-6, deeply hydrate and repair dry or damaged skin. Rosehip oil is also a great choice for reducing dark spots, scars, and hyperpigmentation, making it a natural remedy for skin tone imbalance. Rosehip oil was used by the ancient Egyptians, including Cleopatra, who was known to use it to maintain her radiant complexion. It was also a staple in folk medicine throughout Europe. Canned deviled ham and pickle roll-ups were the kind of snack your aunt brought to every potluck, arranged in neat spirals and stabbed with colored toothpicks like they were too proud to touch. All it took was a slice of cold lunch meat, a smear of canned deviled ham, pink, salty, and oddly spicy, and a sliver of dill pickle rolled right into the center. You made a bunch, stuck them in the fridge, and waited. No oven, no pan, just 5 minutes and the kind of quiet confidence that came from growing up when no one threw anything away. They were tangy, creamy, and held together more by faith than structure, but they never fell apart. That was the magic. These little bites were part Southern hospitality, part post-war pantry science. You saw them at baby showers, game nights, backyard barbecues, wherever folks wanted to eat with their fingers and feel just a little bit fancy. You could eat 5 without noticing. You could eat 10 and still be hungry. But that did not matter. Because when you bit into one, you remembered exactly what made the strangest foods feel like home. Potatoes had more use than just what was under all the layers. Once peeled, people would often fry the potato skins as a midday snack. Nothing would ever go to waste in homes back then, as you must have gathered by now. If they can make stuff out of sausage drippings and drain the fat from bacon to reuse, frying up some potato skins does not seem that out of the box at all. These fried skins were the perfect sidekick to potato pancakes, and the fact that the skins had a lot of health benefits made it all the more appealing. Things like this really helped to keep appetites in check, and that meant that the financial situation of the home would be calmer too. Grandma always had a jar of chia seed pudding in the fridge, her go-to breakfast or snack packed with omega-3 fatty acids and fiber. Made by simply mixing chia seeds with milk and letting it sit overnight to thicken, this simple dish became a powerhouse of hydration and digestion. To make chia seed pudding, all you need is 3 tablespoons of chia seeds and about a cup of liquid. Stir them together, let it sit in the fridge for at least 4 hours, and voila, an easy, nutrient-packed treat. Add honey, vanilla, or fresh fruit for extra flavor. Chia seeds are rich in omega-3s, which help keep skin hydrated and promote a healthy glow. The high fiber content supports digestion by keeping things moving smoothly in the gut, which in turn can reduce bloating and promote clear skin. Plus, chia seeds are loaded with antioxidants, which protect skin from the damaging effects of free radicals. This nutritious snack has been around for centuries, used by ancient civilizations like the Aztecs and Mayans, who believed chia seeds gave them energy and endurance. Grandma knew this. She always said, "Chia seeds are like little miracle workers for your skin and digestion." And honestly, who could argue with that logic? Ketchup and egg-fried toast was not created in a fancy kitchen or from a cookbook. It was born of empty shelves and early mornings. In the kind of house where breakfast was whatever you could piece together, this dish was king. 1 slice of white bread, pan-fried in bacon grease if you had it, or just dry if you did not. Crack an egg into a bowl, squirt in some ketchup, beat it until it looked like sunset soup, and pour it over the bread in the skillet. That was it. The ketchup gave the eggs a strange pink glow. The toast would go soggy in the middle and you would eat it hot, standing over the sink. Some families swore by this as a Depression-era invention. Others just remembered it as a single mother's trick to make the last egg stretch across 2 mouths. And yet, it was always more than the sum of its parts. The smell alone could make a kitchen feel full. It was fast, filling, and tasted better than it had any right to. Try serving it now, and you might get a few raised eyebrows. But taste it again, and you will remember what it felt like to need something warm. Potatoes had more use than just what was under all the layers. Once peeled, people would often fry the potato skins as a midday snack. Nothing would ever go to waste in homes back then, as you must have gathered by now. If they can make stuff out of sausage drippings and drain the fat from bacon to reuse, frying up some potato skins does not seem that out of the box at all. These fried skins were the perfect sidekick to potato pancakes, and the fact that the skins had a lot of health benefits made it all the more appealing. Things like this really helped to keep appetites in check, and that meant that the financial situation of the home would be calmer too. Grandma's skincare routine wasn't complete without her oatmeal scrub. This humble yet effective exfoliator, made with pantry staples like oats, honey, and yogurt, was her tried-and-true method to keep her skin smooth and glowing. Creating it is straightforward. Start with 2 tablespoons of finely ground oatmeal. Mix in a tablespoon of honey and add enough plain yogurt to form a thick paste. Gently massage it onto your face in circular motions, let it sit for a few minutes, and rinse with warm water. The result is skin so soft, you'll wonder why you ever bothered with store-bought scrubs. Oatmeal is the hero here, acting as a natural exfoliant that gently removes dead skin cells while soothing irritation. Honey contributes its antibacterial and moisturizing properties, while yogurt, rich in lactic acid, helps to brighten the skin and even out tone. Oats have been used for centuries, even in ancient Egypt and Rome, to treat skin conditions and maintain softness. Oatmeal baths were a go-to remedy for itchy skin long before modern dermatology. Grandma used to say, Why spend a fortune at the spa when breakfast ingredients do the job just fine? And frankly, after trying this scrub, it's hard to argue with her logic. Mayonnaise banana bites are the kind of recipe that stops people in their tracks right before they say, "Wait, what?" But yes, it was real. You sliced a banana, added a dab of mayonnaise on each piece, and if you were really bold, sprinkled chopped peanuts or crushed cornflakes on top. It was a Southern thing, or maybe a Bridge Club thing. It was definitely a "my grandmother swore by it" thing. The banana was sweet and soft. The mayonnaise was tangy and thick. And somehow together, they created something your taste buds could not quite place, but could not stop thinking about. This was finger food from a world that did not waste. A time when fruit and fat were precious and flavor combinations were born out of what was left in the pantry. Kids gagged, adults shrugged, but everyone tried it at least once. And for some, it stuck. A weird, creamy, banana-flavored memory lodged deep in the mind. You might not crave it now, but take a bite and tell me you do not remember something. Drop your favorite memory in the comments. Tap like if you felt a pang of nostalgia, and hit subscribe so the old flavors never fade.